I spent my entire 20s carrying them. My mother, my father, my younger sister. I was their invisible safety net, their retirement fund, their life insurance policy, all wrapped into one exhausted 29-year-old woman. I thought my sacrifice meant something. I thought it earned me respect. I thought it earned me a permanent place in their hearts. I was wrong. The moment I chose to put my own life first, they turned my decade of devotion into a pile of trash bags waiting by the door. But they forgot one crucial thing. When you rely on someone for oxygen, you don't cut their lifeline. And they had just given me permission to finally, ruthlessly, cut theirs. Stick around until the end of this video, because I have a definitive, personal opinion on this story that I absolutely can't wait to share. If you've ever felt completely used by the people who were supposed to love you most, hit that like button. If you're ready to hear how I turned a decade of pain into the most satisfying revenge I've ever known, subscribe and let me know in the comments. What's the deepest betrayal you've ever faced? This story starts with a simple lunch and ends with the silence of a canceled life. The story of my betrayal really starts 11 years ago, when I was 18. My parents, bless their hearts, were never great planners. They retired early after a business failed, and suddenly, their savings weren't enough. They were panicking. I was fresh out of high school, just about to start community college, and I watched the anxiety consume them. So, I stepped up. I sacrificed my college fund and got a full-time job, then a second part-time job. I never traveled. I never bought a new car. Every single month, a huge chunk of my paycheck went to them. I paid their rent, always on the first of the month, like clockwork. I paid the electricity, gas, and water because my father couldn't handle the stress of bills. And most importantly, I paid for my little sister Claire to go to university, something I had dreamed of doing myself. I wanted her to have the chance to give up. For 11 years, from 18 to 29, my life was a math problem. How little can I spend on myself to keep them comfortable? I never lived with them after that first year, but I couldn't afford a large place, so I rented a single tiny room near my work. My childhood bedroom in their house, the one I paid for, became my storage unit. All my books, my old photographs, my winter clothes, the things that made up my history, they stayed locked in that one room, my last physical connection to my past. My parents rarely showed gratitude. They acted as if my financial support was just a natural continuation of their retirement plan. I was the eldest daughter. This was my duty. If I ever bought myself something new, my mother would ask, "Is that necessary, Elias? Couldn't that money have gone towards the gas bill?" The constant emotional guilt was exhausting. Then at 29, my life changed. I was pregnant. I know, a single mom. It wasn't the traditional path, but I had wanted this child for years. I was finally choosing my own future. This was my line in the sand. I organized a quiet lunch to tell them. It was at their favorite diner, the one I always paid for. My father looked tired, distracted. My mother was cheerful, ordering the most expensive thing on the menu. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad," I started, "I have some big news. I'm having a baby. I'll be a single mother, and I'm ready to start my own family." My father paused, raising his eyebrows slightly. "Oh, well, that's certainly a thing, Elias. Typical, but my mother." Her smile didn't waver, but it got cold. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't ask about the father. She just stared at my plate. I waited for the shoe to drop. "So," I continued, "this means things will change. I'll focus on myself now. Starting next month, all the money I earn will be spent on preparing for my child. I can no longer support your living expenses." The atmosphere in that diner, moments before, had been cozy. The smell of frying onions, the clatter of silverware. Now it was frozen. My mother took a long sip of her iced tea. She put the glass down slowly, looked me dead in the eye, and didn't say a single word for the next 15 minutes. We finished the meal in heavy silence. As I stood up to leave, I leaned in to hug her goodbye. She dodged the hug, and her eyes, usually warm for anyone else, narrowed. A tiny, vicious smirk touched her lips. "How selfish," she whispered, her voice low enough that Dad couldn't hear. "How utterly selfish to abandon your family the moment you find a new distraction." I drove away from that lunch shaking, the word selfish echoing in my head. 11 years of my life, gone, and my reward was to be called selfish. I pulled my car over and sat there, the weight of their entitlement crushing me. I felt the first real flicker of justified rage. Fine, I thought. If I'm selfish, you haven't seen anything yet. But the real shock came hours later. That evening, my phone rang. It was Claire, my younger sister. Her voice wasn't just upset. It was a high, panicked shriek. "Elias! You have to come home. You have to come now!" she sobbed. "Claire, what happened? Is Mom okay?" "Mom is fine. Your stuff isn't. She's packing all your things. She's throwing everything out on the driveway. Come and grab them fast. She's clearing your room." I hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew, with sickening certainty, that this was their retribution. The cost of my freedom. I drove back to that house, the house I paid for, the house I considered my emotional anchor, and the sight stopped me cold. My belongings were not neatly boxed. They were piled haphazardly on the front lawn, a shameful, chaotic mountain. My childhood, my memories, my history, clothes stuffed into black garbage bags, books tumbling out of cheap, taped-up boxes. My old school trophies, the ones I'd forgotten about but cherished, were stacked awkwardly against the porch railing, looking cheap and meaningless now. I felt a dizzying wave of disbelief. I started trembling, not from anger yet, but from a profound, terrifying coldness. My mother emerged from the house, looking completely triumphant. She had changed into a clean apron, as if she'd just finished a successful spring cleaning project. She didn't look angry. She looked satisfied. "Took you long enough, Elias," she said, arms crossed, a sickening little smile playing on her lips. "We've been busy." I couldn't speak loudly. My throat was tight. "Mom, what is this? Why is everything outside?" She waved a dismissive hand toward my life on the lawn. "Oh, that? Your room is no longer your room, dear. Since you're turning your back on us so fast, then it's only natural that we don't keep your things in our house. We need the space." "Need the space?" I managed to choke out. "Yes, I need the space," she snapped, losing the polite veneer. "I am renting the room. We found a lovely young tenant this afternoon. They paid the first month and deposit already. Since you've decided to be selfish and keep your money, we have to find a replacement, don't we? And we can't have your junk cluttering up valuable space." Junk. My books, my sister's art projects I'd saved, my entire 20s reduced to junk. She hadn't cleared the room to punish me. She cleared it because she was desperate for replacement income. And she had used my moment of vulnerability, my pregnancy, as the excuse to do it in the cruelest way possible. The betrayal wasn't just in the money. It was in the total lack of human decency. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked past her and saw Claire standing in the hallway, eyes wide with tears, clutching a small framed picture of me and her from years ago. Claire mouthed, "I'm sorry." I didn't argue. Arguing would mean recognizing her authority to do this. I turned my attention to the mess. It took me 2 exhausting, humiliating hours to cram everything into my small sedan in the tiny rented room I had. That night, I lay on my uncomfortable couch, surrounded by boxes and black garbage bags of my own life. My small room was suffocating, filled with the debris of my past. My entire body ached from lifting and shoving. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional weight. They forgot. 11 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. They skipped struggling. They went straight to entitlement, and when I stopped the flow, they didn't even hesitate. They were willing to replace me with a stranger for a few $100s a month. I was not their daughter. I was a financial asset they just liquidated. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the wall, running my hands over my still flat stomach, thinking about the small, innocent life growing inside me. This child was my future, and my parents were a toxic, entitled part of the past I needed to cut out completely. They had acted with swift, brutal coldness to protect their comfort. Now it was my turn. The revenge wouldn't be dramatic yelling. It had to be surgical. It had to be financial. I needed to do to their world exactly what they did to my room, make it suddenly empty and unlivable. The morning after, the emotional numbness gave way to a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't just a squabble. It was the end of a relationship, and I needed to manage the divorce. My first thought was for Claire. She was still living there, finishing her degree, relying on my tuition payments. I couldn't let my mother's actions sabotage her education, the one thing I had sacrificed my own education for. I called Claire, ensuring Mom and Dad were out. "Claire, listen closely," I instructed, my voice flat and firm. "I am not stopping your tuition. I will pay your final semester directly to the university. You need to start looking for part-time work or a student loan immediately. You can't rely on me anymore, and you certainly can't rely on them." She cried, but she understood. "Elias, they don't even have money for groceries this week. That's why Mom was so frantic to rent your room." That confirmed it. They were already struggling, relying on the instant cash from a new tenant just to cover their immediate needs. My planned revenge would hit harder and faster than I thought. I spent the next week planning. This was the meticulous, almost surgical part that gave me a grim, quiet thrill. I pulled up 11 years of my financial records. I detailed every single payment: rent checks, utility bills, maintenance fees. The total was staggering. I didn't want the money back, but seeing the number gave my righteous anger an anchor. The revenge had to be timed perfectly, not just a threat, but a clean, sudden cut. My support had always been the scaffolding holding up their lives. I would remove the scaffolding and let their entitled little structure collapse. I set the date for the following Monday, the 1st of the month, the day their rent was due. Here was the plan: the cold switch, the rent shock. I had always written the check to the landlord and mailed it from my work address. This month, the landlord would receive a certified letter from me, not a check. It stated clearly that I would no longer be financially responsible for the lease as of the next month, and to please direct all future inquiries and payment demands to my parents, who were the named tenants. I dropped this in the mail immediately. I wanted the landlord to have a few days to process it before rent day. The utility blackout. The worst pain is the immediate physical one. All the utilities, gas, electricity, internet, were still in my name, a holdover from when I first took over. I called each provider one by one. I explained I was moving and needed a clean cutoff. I scheduled the services to be disconnected on Monday morning at 9 a.m. No warning. Just silence and darkness. The sisters' safety. I sent Claire enough emergency money for 2 weeks of food and transportation, telling her to stay quiet and not confront them until the storm hit. The weekend leading up to Monday felt charged, electric. I kept picturing my mother's face when the power went out, when the internet died, when the landlord called about the rent. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt an incredible sense of justice. They took my physical connection to the past. I was taking their physical comfort in the present. You wanted to be selfish, Mom? Here is the consequence of relying entirely on a person you treat like an ATM. Sunday night, I barely slept. I kept checking my watch, waiting for the clock to hit 9 a.m. on Monday. The wait was a delicious torture. Monday morning arrived. I was sitting at my desk at work, my pregnancy nausea suddenly gone, replaced by a cold, nervous energy. At 8:55 a.m., I stood up and walked to the break room, needing to be alone. NCM. I stared at the clock on the microwave. I imagined the electricity in their house simply ceasing to be. The quiet whir of the refrigerator stopped. The Wi-Fi signal disappears. The heating pilot light clicking off. I felt a sudden lightness, like a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted off my back. The first call came 20 minutes later. It was my mother. I recognized the number and let it go straight to voicemail. "Elias, where are you?" "The power is out!" "The internet is gone. What kind of prank is this? It's not funny. Get the electricity back on right now. I have calls to make." She sounded annoyed, inconvenienced, not yet panicked. She still thought she could simply order me to fix it. The second call came an hour later, more frantic. I listened to that one too. "Elias, I called the utility company and they said the account was canceled." "Why would you cancel the account?" "Our food is going bad. The water heater is cold. You need to call them and tell them it was a mistake. Don't you dare ignore me, young lady." The true panic started just before noon. This time the call was from my father. His voice was strained, high-pitched, and weak, a sound I hadn't heard since they first ran out of money a decade ago. "Elias," he pleaded. "The landlord called. They said the rent wasn't paid, and they received a notice from you saying you're no longer responsible for the lease." They're threatening to start the eviction process immediately. Where is the money? You have to send the money! We can't move. We have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to go. My internal monologue was cold. And where did I have to go when you threw my life on the lawn? I had nowhere either, but I had to make it work. I finally called them back that evening. I used my calmest, most clinical voice. Hello, Mother. Hello, Father. My mother immediately launched into a screaming tirade about the ruined food, the cold showers, and the disgrace of the eviction notice. She called me every name she could think of. Cruel, vicious, unnatural. I waited until she was gasping for air. Are you done, Mom? I asked. The silence on the line was thick. Good, I continued. Let me be perfectly clear. This is not a prank. I am no longer financially responsible for your comfort. You called me selfish when I chose to raise my child. You liquidated my past, my memories, my possessions, for a quick few dollars, rather than facing the consequences of your own reckless spending. You proved you only value me for my income, not my love. I am now liquidating you as a financial asset. My father cut in, his voice trembling. Elias, please. We need time. Just 2 more months to get a new loan, a new job. You had 11 years, I interrupted. I gave you 11 years. Now you have the consequences. I suggest you talk to your new tenant. Perhaps they are willing to pay extra to keep the lights on. I didn't wait for another word. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my tiny room, no longer suffocated by the boxes, but surrounded by the quiet hum of my own power. I had done it. I had been betrayed, but I had fought back not with tears, but with cold, calculated justice. The relief was overwhelming. Later that week, Claire called me, her voice much calmer. She told me the landlord had given them a 30-day notice. They were packing frantically. I found a part-time job, Elias, Claire said, and I got the student loan paperwork. I'm moving into the dorms next month. I can't thank you enough for getting me out. Just finish your degree, Claire, I told her. That's all the thanks I need. As for my parents, the full reality of their situation hit them hard. They didn't find a new apartment they could afford. They had to rely on distant, surprised relatives for a temporary place to stay, humiliated and broke. They had to start working minimum wage jobs just to afford basic food. They had finally been forced to live the life they should have started planning for a decade ago. I never regretted it. The scar of their betrayal remains. But now, every day, when I feel my baby move, I am reminded of the new life I saved. Not just my child's, but my own. The truth is, revenge is rarely clean. My father still tries to guilt-trip me occasionally, but I just hang up. My mother sent me a card for my baby shower. A completely empty card, just signed Mom. I didn't even bother to throw it out. I just let it sit on the counter as a reminder. They destroyed the relationship, and I destroyed the financial foundation that relationship was built on. It was a fair trade. They taught me that the moment you stop providing, you become disposable. I taught them that the moment you dispose of the provider, you lose everything. I am focusing on preparing a safe, stable, and emotionally healthy world for my child. A world where support is given out of love, not obligation. A world where an 11-year sacrifice is met with gratitude, not a smirk and a pile of boxes on the curb. And that brings us to the final word on this staggering case of entitled betrayal. What Elias did was not petty. It was a surgical strike of self-preservation. Her parents saw her only as an ATM, not a daughter, and they liquidated her past, her home, her memories, all for a couple $100s in rent. When they did that, they formally revoked the family contract. They gave her the moral high ground and the final weapon. The cold switch wasn't revenge. It was an eviction notice delivered to a lifetime of entitlement. This level of narcissism only understands one language: immediate, undeniable consequence. Elias didn't just save herself. She built the strongest possible foundation for her new child's life by cutting out the toxic root. So, let's talk about justice. If you believe this ending was fair, if you felt that deep, satisfying relief when those utility calls came in, then smash the like button right now. And here's the final question I have for you. Her parents called her selfish. Was she? Or was she finally, after 11 years, just prioritizing her own survival? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week, we're diving into another case where the abused became the avenger. Until then, remember, never let someone else hold the scissors when you're the one holding the lifeline.